is true. The internet is broken. You cannot use the internet today. It's not working anywhere in the world because I wore a t-shirt alongside Kanye West, which read White Lives Matter. And God forbid you wear a t-shirt that says White Lives Matter. We wore this for his Yeezy Season 9 fashion show here in Paris. And people are upset. They're very upset about that. They're going, why on earth? How could you? How dare you wear this shirt? How dare you make a mockery of the BLM movement? In addition to this, in case you missed it on Kanye West's Instagram page, he wrote this: everyone knows that Black Lives Matter was a scam. Now it's over. You're welcome. That is the only response or the only thing that he has said publicly about wearing the t-shirt. And you obviously know, if you're watching this, where I stand on the Black Lives Matter movement. In fact, I'm doing an entire documentary to expose the fraudulent nature of that movement and the organization that stood behind it and benefited billions and billions of dollars because they elicited Black grief. They sold Black people a concept of their oppression. They used poorer Black Americans as a marketing firm for their organization. And where did that money go? Well, certainly not to Black America. So I had this wonderful thing this morning, this wonderful experience, and I'll tell you why it was wonderful. I had breakfast with Ye at his hotel, and it was wonderful because it was one of those moments where I realized how far I've come from where I was. The first time that I ever came to Paris, ironically, I was having breakfast with a woman whose family I worked for, and she was so awful to me. And I'll never forget this moment because it almost ruined Paris for me. It was a wealthy woman who told me, as we sat in her hotel, which was the George Cinq Hotel, she said, "Candace, a girl like you shouldn't even be here. Look how expensive the omelet is that you're eating. Do you see how expensive it is? An omelet is $35. A girl like you can't afford this hotel, or you can't afford to stay here." And I remember I was so upset that when I left that breakfast, I was crying because I was so angry that anybody had spoken to me like that. And fast forward, I guess, more than 10 years now, and I am sitting at a hotel with having an omelet, by the way, with Ye West, and we are discussing the internet, which we just broke over this t-shirt. And I just started jotting down some things that he was saying because he was actually giving an interview to another magazine. And he said, "I perform for an audience of one, and that's God." I loved that statement, so I wrote it down. He also said, quote, "Utopia is possible for not who we are being led by." I'm going to say that again. Utopia is possible for not who we are being led by, which of course leads me to think about Black Lives Matter again, and these people who claim to be leaders and knew that what they were doing was further dividing the masses. I mean, the whole idea here via the Black Lives Matter movement was to make sure that Black people saw oppression and saw white supremacy surrounding them, and convincing them that if they leaned into this narrative, that somehow their lives would be better. It was a mirage. Actually, that's a word that Ye used during the breakfast too. It was basically a mirage, right? This idea that somehow all we needed to do was burn down our own neighborhoods. All we needed to do was have our youth wearing a George Floyd t-shirt. All we needed to do was loot Targets and loot these expensive stores, and somehow justice would be delivered. And of course it wasn't. There is a deep irony and a sad irony when you consider that wearing a t-shirt has led such a tremor throughout the world, right? A t-shirt that says White Lives Matter, which should be implied, right? White Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Asian Lives Matter. It should be implied. Yet people are angry and they are being vicious online because they can't believe that we have the audacity to detract from the movement, which is a lie, right? Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives Matter, then some of these things that we have been talking about on this show, things I've been talking about throughout my entire political career, would be getting attention. Not the t-shirt, right? Not the t-shirt, but these actual statistics that matter. And here are just a few of them. 117,626 Black children were killed by surgical abortion in the United States in 2018, right? Those are recent statistics. Just so we are clear, abortion in America has contributed to the greatest decline in Black population since the first Black slaves arrived. You will hear people often talk about lynching. This is like a new thing. They like neoliberalism. They could talk about lynching and they compare everything to lynchings. It's just like being lynched. Well, for your reference, you should know that 4,467 people in the United States were victims of lynchings from 1883 to 1941. 3,265 of those people were Black. And you keep talking about lynching as this horrific thing that's happened in the past, right? And yet when you say to people today that 20 million Black infants were aborted, they don't even blink an eye. They don't even bat an eyelash. No, less than batting an eyelash. They tell those same Black people that they need to be outraged when a Planned Parenthood clinic shuts down. 20 million. When you talk about people that are killed in the millions, when you talk about the Jewish Holocaust, when you talk about the Rwandan Holocaust, people are, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Of course, because it is horrible. But for whatever reason, since we have convinced ourselves to genocide our own offspring, nobody cares. Nobody cares. They don't bat an eyelash. In fact, they tell you that it is your right. So think about that. 20 million Black babies, and yet a t-shirt is what got attention last night. In 2012, more Black babies were killed by abortion in New York City than were born. Imagine that, your abortion rate being higher than your live birth rate in a city. And they celebrate it. Do you remember notoriously the governor lit up the city pink when they talked about expanding abortion rights, expanding the Black genocide, light up the skyscrapers pink. It is a win. A win for who, though, is the question. A win for who? 79% of Planned Parenthood abortion facilities are located within walking distance of neighborhoods that have a higher proportion of Latina and Black women. But that's not the only thing that's killing Black America, literally. We also know obesity is killing Black America. I wish, you know what we should have done? We should have put a White Lives Matter t-shirt on Lizzo. Maybe we could have gotten a lot of attention about obesity and how it's actually killing Black Americans. Obesity is the number one killer in America, okay? I know Black Lives Matter told you it was police shootings, right? It made you think that thousands of Black men were dying at the hands of police. No, absolutely not. I think in the year 2020, was it 9 unarmed Black men were killed by police? 9 of them. But obesity is killing people at a very high rate, and Black women have the highest rates of obesity. So the number one killer, and of course, we sit at the top of it. Black women, 56.9% of us are classified as obese. We shouldn't talk about that. You know why? Because it didn't have a t-shirt on it that said White Lives Matter. You talk about criminality. No one wants to talk about it if you're not talking about a police officer, right? People don't want to talk about the fact that Black people are slaughtering other Black people. People don't want to talk about Black on Black crime. It doesn't matter because we're doing it to ourselves, right? Just like we're aborting our own babies. Applaud it. Applaud it. In fact, put it in the music. Put the criminality in the music and celebrate it. Give it a Grammy. Give Black criminality a Grammy so that we understand that this is ours. Sit in the cool club, right? Now we know what it means to be Black. Now we know what it means to not be a traitor to your own race. Murder your own race. And if you don't do it in your womb, grab a gun. Kill the guy next to you. Applause all around the world. Per the CDC, African Americans are 4 times more likely to be killed by a gun than the overall population. And once again, it's not a white person that is pulling the trigger. It's another Black person. We account for almost 40% of all of the homicide offenders in the United States. 40% coming from the smallest piece of the population. We're talking about, 7% of the population is Black men, and they're accounting for 40% of all of the homicides in the United States. But let's not talk about that. In fact, let's call that racist to even acknowledge that truth. To talk about the ills in our own community, that's racism. Let's just move on for it. People love to talk about the incarceration rates, right? Because the incarceration rates allow you to understand the result without ever having to talk about the problem, right? You don't have to talk about the equation. I'll just give you the answer. Black men are incarcerated, right? It says here that there are nearly 5 times the rate of black men in prison than white people. Oh, perfect narrative. It must be racism. No, it has nothing to do with the fact that we're the most murderous group in America. Has nothing to do with that. Of course, 1 + 1 = 2, but let's focus on the 2 and not the 1 + 1. Let's focus on everything except for the fact that we also know that these individuals that are ending up in prison, or these individuals that are ending up killed, or these infants that are being taken out of their mother's own womb, they're all coming from broken families. Families that have been strategically broken down in a culture that further promotes the breakdown of family, that corrodes the value of women, that corrodes the value of men. But hey, that wasn't wearing a White Lives Matter t-shirt. So who cares? Who cares? Who cares if 20 million black babies are dead? Who cares if half of our black men are locked up? Who cares if black women, half of them are clinically obese and spelling out their own death sentences? Who cares if we represent 40% of all homicide offenders? It doesn't matter because we didn't put it in a Black Lives Matter tee. You know what else doesn't matter? It doesn't matter at all. The education statistics. Don't even pay attention to the fact that 74% of black boys in California can't pass a basic reading exam. You know why? Because we love ignorance. We should celebrate ignorance, right? Who cares that across 5 schools in an inner city like Baltimore, they couldn't find a single child that was proficient in reading and in writing? Who cares? Who cares that 3 out of 4 black boys in California schools cannot meet writing standards? Who cares? It's not in a White Lives Matter t-shirt, so we won't talk about the fact that nearly 80% of black boys in the 4th grade failed to meet state reading standards. None of that stuff, for whatever reason, resonates. No one's ever outraged. It never trends on Twitter. Last night, White Lives Matter was trending on Twitter because Kanye West had the nerve and the gall to put that t-shirt on. White Lives Matter. Now the press, how dare you? How dare you? What a form of engaging in white supremacy. None of this that I just read to you is white supremacy, but the t-shirt is a form of white supremacy. You know what the problem is? The problem is not what's happening inside the households or what's happening on the streets or the slaughtering that's taken place. The problem is not the women that have been trained to kill their own offspring, not to raise their sons, the men that are on the streets killing one another and putting out music that encourages their offspring to do the same. The real problem in Black America is that Kanye and Candace put on a White Lives Matter t-shirt. So let's focus on that instead.